My name is DJ. If we've not met, I have the honour of being the lead pastor here. And it's my pleasure today to introduce to you our guest speaker, Sheridan Voysey. Now, Sheridan lives in Oxford, England. And when he and I were first discussing the possibility of him speaking in this series, we looked to do it by live stream. And then we checked our clocks. Turns out it's a little after 1 a.m. in Oxford, England at the moment. So instead, Sheridan has recorded this message for us, especially this morning here at New Vine, and for those of you watching online. Now, as Libby said before, because we're kind of pretending we're at the movies this morning, we've made popcorn. So that's going to be coming around from now on, and it'll come around eventually to you as well. So just to help you get in the mood and the mode. But let me tell you a little bit about Sheridan while that's happening. Sheridan is the author of 8 books. He is a podcaster, a broadcaster, and as I say, an author. One of his books won Australian Christian Book of the Year a few years back. These are some of the titles that he's written. Before he left and relocated to the UK in 2011, he was the founding host of a live nationally syndicated radio program called Open House, which explored Christian spirituality in our secular environment today. And now, living in the UK, he's regularly heard by 9 million listeners on BBC Radio 2's Pause for Thought program. He speaks at conferences around the world, and this is him there with Zoe Ball in the BBC Radio 2 program studio. And recently he founded something called the Friendship Lab to help us help our relationships to thrive. So it's wonderful to have him sharing with us today. Grab some popcorn, but more importantly, grab hold of some key ideas and also some key practical take-home hints to put into practice this week to build and to be better at friendship. Here now is Sheridan.
Hi New Vine, what a privilege it is to contribute to this wonderful series that you're running, Reconnecting. You know, each of us longs to belong, so I'm thrilled that you're exploring this fundamental need that we all have to connect with others. We're talking about friendship today and the power of it, and quick advertisement aside, if you're interested in this theme a little bit more, come and join us at Friendship Lab, where we empower men and women with the wisdom and skills to make their friendships thrive, friendshiplab.org. We'll tell you a little bit more about who we are, what we do. All right, let me take you to a seminar room, pretty drab room actually, in Sydney, somewhere around 2008. My wife Maren and I are sitting there with about 20 other people waiting to do a seminar on fostering and adoption. Now, I've lived in the UK 12 years so far, and I can tell you there's a fair bit of difference between the average Sydney-sider, or indeed probably the average person who lives in Newcastle, and the average Brit, particularly those who live in England in the south. The English southerners tend to be a lot more polite, a lot more kind of circumvent. They kind of take a long time to kind of get to the point. They avoid abrupt language in any way, shape or form. Not so the average Sydney-sider, who, if you need to know something, they will tell you straight out. Well, our facilitator for this seminar, she was a typical Sydney-sider. Yes, there'd be some blessings. Yes, there'd be some lovely moments you would have as foster carers and adoptive parents, but she was going to roll out to us in no uncertain terms the challenges of being a foster carer or adoptive parent. What are you going to do, she would say, if the little girl that comes into your life won't let you hug her because of her attachment issues? What are you going to do if the little boy who comes into your family wants to smack holes in your walls because of all the pent-up anger because of everything he's experienced in his life to date? What are you going to do? How are you going to be supported? You're going to need a support network around you. And then she raised this question, which I'm going to raise with you this morning. It's burrowed under my skin ever since. And here's the question. Who could you call at 2 a.m. when everything has gone wrong? It's a good question, isn't it? Who can you call at 2 a.m. when everything's gone wrong? And I remember sitting there staring down at the floor and my pen hovering above the workbook because I wasn't too sure what name to write in. And it wasn't that I didn't have friends. We had just moved to Sydney, so we hadn't really had time to make friends. But we did have friends in Brisbane and Perth and other places that we'd lived, but they were hours away. But even then, Sheridan, how close were you with them? How intentional were you even being at staying in touch with them? And were you close enough that you could call them in your moment of greatest vulnerability and their moment of greatest disruption, 2 o'clock in the morning? Who could you call at 2 o'clock in the morning when everything has gone wrong? That's why I think we need to give some time to this most powerful of relationships called friendship. And by the end of our 1, 2, 3 hours of preaching together, I hope that I will have reconverted us all to this powerful relationship and encouraged us to raise it as a sacred calling to follow, and indeed to have enabled us to prioritize it afresh in our lives. All right, so we've got some problems to address. There are some statistics that can let you know just how big an issue this is. Right now, about 25% of Australians say they have no one to talk to or turn to. That was a report from Swinburne University a couple of years ago. Just a few weeks ago, a report came out saying 30% of Australians are regularly lonely. We know from other research about 51% of us find it hard to make new friends. If that's you, don't worry, you're not alone. And we, from our own research at Friendship Lab, found about 40% of us want to get closer to the friends we have. We just don't feel we're as close as we could be. This is why it's really important. In fact, it's such an important relationship that Robin Dunbar, one of the foremost experts in this area, says it's the most important single factor influencing our health, well-being, and happiness. I would say God is number one, but he's absolutely into something, don't you think? Why do we have the problem? We could talk to all sorts of theorists, statisticians who would tell us the reasons why. We could talk about the growing political polarization that has gripped Australia, the UK, US, and elsewhere. We could talk about that toxic individualism that has us focusing so much on our own selves and subjective experience rather than other people. We could talk about the rise of single occupancy households. We could talk about the rise of smartphones and how they're influencing our sense of isolation, ironically. But actually, when we surveyed 1,100 people at the beginning of the year for Friendship Lab, we asked them what their barrier was. The actual answer, number one cause, turned out to be something far more mundane, and that is busyness. Can you resonate with that? A lack of time is the number one barrier to both making new friends and maintaining the friendships we have. But I'd like to raise a second barrier that we should address as well, and that is neglect. Both in society and also in the church, we have neglected this important relationship because we focused on another love, romance. Now, if you don't believe me, this afternoon I would like you to go and check your Spotify playlists. Open them up. I charge you to find one song about friendship in your Spotify playlist. If you find one, go on and find two. Even if you find three, you will find that they are basically mere drops in an ocean of love songs. We could talk about Valentine's Day. If I was to ask you the date of Valentine's Day, I'm sure you'd know. In fact, let's do a little experiment right now. I'd like us all to yell out at once what the date of Valentine's Day is as I prompt you, okay? Everyone, together, the date of Valentine's Day is... And all the women are kind of nudging their husbands because they couldn't remember. But you all know it, right? Okay, all together, out loud. The date of International Friendship Day is... I think I can rest my case. We spend so much time focusing on romance over friendship. And even in the church, we have books and courses and whole ministries dedicated to marriage and parenting and family. And I thank God for every one of those resources. But name me one that is focused on friendship, something that we hope Friendship Lab is going to redress. So what is a friend? Well, this is where we could roll out the old Jim Hayes joke. He says, well, a friend helps you move house, but a best friend helps you move a body. Or I could paraphrase Groucho Marx, who said a friend is someone who visits you in jail, a good friend is someone who bails you out, and a best friend is someone who turns to you in the cell and says, that was fun. Here's the definition that we use at Friendship Lab for what a friend is. A friend is someone I can talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. And I want to explore this definition by looking at the story of some friends in the Bible. No, it's not David and Jonathan. No, it's not Jesus and the disciples. It's actually a group of 3 people who are friends with Jesus that we often overlook, or we look at their story for other themes. There are 3 siblings named Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And their story starts in Luke chapter 10, where this very first element of our definition really comes to the fore. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now, our home is our intimate place. It's the place where we can let our hair down, kick our shoes off, where we can just be ourselves, we can slouch on the couch. And all of our personality is revealed in everything around for everybody to see. It's revealed and reflected in the books on our shelves and the artwork on our walls. It's revealed in the colour of our kitchens and everything else. And we've got, dishes in the sink, and there's clothes up on the washing line, and it's our kind of intimate place. So when we invite somebody into our homes, we are inviting them into our lives. Hospitality is ultimately the seedbed of friendship. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Now, if you were to put a word on it, what emotion do you think Martha is expressing right then? I'd say it's frustration. An interesting thing is that she's expressing frustration in not just her sister, but in Jesus. Now you compare that to some of the other kind of language that you find addressed to Jesus by other people in the New Testament. It's all very British. It's all very, well, you think about the lawyer. "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Or what about the official who comes along and says, "Sir, please come along and heal my daughter"? Or what about the guy suffering from leprosy and he says, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." It's all very polite. It's all very deferential. It's recognizing that the role and the position that Jesus has. It's very British. It's not very Sydney-sider. And that's what we hear from Martha. Basically, she's saying, "Jesus, why don't you tell my lazy sister to get in the kitchen and help me with the mashed potatoes?" This is not so much the language of lordship, it's the language of friendship. This is emotional honesty, and you don't find it anywhere else in the stories of Jesus. Martha knows Jesus so well, she can express not just her devotion, but her frustration. And it reminds me of some lovely words from Dina Craik, who's an author. She's very well famous for a movie you might have heard of called Babette's Feast. She wrote this: "Oh, the inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thoughts nor measure words, but pouring them out, all right out, just as they are, chaff and grain together." You know, that lovely experience like she's expressing there, where you know that you can just splurge it out, even if half of it doesn't make sense and the other half is probably heretical. But you're in the safe hands of a friend who's going to sift the wheat from the chaff and keep the wheat. This is what Jesus is doing with Martha. In fact, you find him do it the very next thing that we see goes on. Jesus responds, "Martha, Martha, you're worried and upset about many things, but only a few things are needed. Basically, only one thing is needed, and Mary's chosen it. And it's not going to be taken away from her." In fact, Jesus is pulling a Sydney-sider on Martha. He's being just as abrupt, and basically being as abrupt with her as she was with him. Emotional honesty. Mary's choosing the right thing right here, Martha. And I want you to grow from this. I want you to learn from this. Yeah, there's things to do. And I really appreciate everything you're putting into the dinner that you're putting together. But there's a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place for listening to what I have to share. A friend is someone we can talk to. We can talk to them about the big things and the small, about the football scores and about the plans for the holiday, but also about our longings, and about our doubts, and about our frustrations. Who can you pour your thoughts out to, wheat and chaff together? And who are you offering that to? Being able to help them sort the wheat from the chaff, not judging them for the things that they're saying, helping them to sort it through. A friend is someone I can talk to. And a friend is someone I can depend on. And we find this come into the second episode of this wonderful story of these siblings. When it's basically, we jump over to John chapter 11. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Now we quickly find out that it's not a cold. This is serious. This is the 2 a.m. moment for Mary and Martha. Lazarus is at the point of death at this moment. And we find that all they have to do is say, "The one you love is sick." They don't even need to mention Lazarus's name. The one you love is sick. This is their 2 a.m. moment, and they know who they can call. And this is also really telling because they say the one you love is sick. Now, there's only one other person in the New Testament that actually has some similar language applied to him, and he applies it to himself. These three people, Mary and Martha and Lazarus, actually have an honor that nobody else in the New Testament gets. They are the people for whom it is explicitly said that Jesus loves them. We find it here in verse 1. Lord, the one you love is sick. Verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Verse 36. People looking on say, see how he loved him. And the commentators note this is not used as everywhere else. And we're not talking about sacrificial agape, Greek, sacrificial love here. We're not talking about while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us kind of love. We're not talking about the love that sacrificially gives to somebody else even when they're ugly and sinful. We're not talking about that kind of love. We're talking about affection. We're talking about some people here that Jesus loves the way you love your family members, the way you love those closest to you. He loves them. These are his close friends. Not just sacrifice. This is affection, but it's not just affection either. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. And here is where the sacrificial love comes in. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you. And do you want to go back? To be there for his friend is going to require that Jesus goes back to the little flat in Bethany where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus live. Bethany is about an hour's walk out of Jerusalem. To go and be with his friend, to be there in that moment, to respond to that 2 a.m. moment of need is going to require Jesus to go back into a position of danger. And in fact, as we later find out, it will be the signing of his death warrant. Friendship, it's not just about sacrifice, it's about affection as well. But gosh, it's not just about affection, it's about sacrifice. Friendship has a cost. A couple of years after that 2 a.m. question was posed to Merrin and me in that seminar, Merrin and I faced our own 2 a.m. moment. We had been trying for 10 years to start a family, and we tried everything. We tried IVF, we tried healing prayer, we tried special diets, we tried all sorts of... We tried chiropractic. Why on earth did we try chiropractic? Do you remember when? No, I don't know. Why do we try chiropractic to get a child? Anyway, somebody told us it would work. We tried everything. And after that seminar, we actually went through with adoption as well. We went through 8 months of assessment as a potential adoptive couple, basically to find out, prying into our lives, prying into our details of our relationship, whether we were suitable people to look after somebody else's biological child. And as a result, at the end of that 8-month assessment process, the lovely social worker who came, she said to me, oh gosh, I know I shouldn't say this, but I think I'm going to say it anyway. You're a really attractive couple. I don't think it'll be long until you're placed with a child. A birth mother is going to read your profile. They're going to really want to have their child in your care. Just wait for the phone call. Well, Marion and I waited for the phone call, and 2 months later it hadn't come, and 6 months later it hadn't come, and 9 months and 12 months later it hadn't come, and by 2 years Marion was in a mess because we'd been waiting already so long with all the other things we'd tried. We ended up going back to IVF. We did round after round of IVF, and then finally, Christmas of 2010, we received a phone call with news that we had pretty much given up expecting to hear. It was Emily for the IVF clinic, and she said, it's looking good. And we had celebrations erupt around Australia from our family and friends who'd been walking with us for 10 years. And finally, we were going to have a baby. We drove up from Sydney to Brisbane to have Christmas with our families. And that's when we got a second call from Emily from the IVF clinic. And she said to Merrin, I'm so sorry. There would not be a baby. We did not feel like celebrating Christmas. And so that night, Christmas Eve, we actually packed our bags, packed our car. We started driving back late at night, 10 o'clock or something, started driving back to Sydney. We went to ground for about a week, and then we had to finally send that email to everybody to let them know that the good news had actually turned into bad news. I was angry. I was broken. I was exhausted. I was tired. I didn't know where God was in all of this, and a whole bunch of other things that were happening around about the same time. I needed to talk to somebody. I needed somebody to depend on. And one person came to mind. But I knew he had a family. I knew he had a very busy job. He also lived over 2 hours drive away. he was a person that came to mind. And then as a result of me sending out that bulk email, he replied and we got talking. And I said, I could really do with talking to someone. And you're a long way away. It would take a long period of your time and everything. You know what he said? He said, actually, I have to come to Sydney anyway to go to IKEA. Now, if you ever want to kind of downplay the sacrifice that you're doing for a friend to be there with them, just do that. Oh, I've got to be in your area anyway, and I could just drop in. So he drove his 2 hours, 2.5, whatever it was, to get to me. We had 2 hours together. He did another 2.5 hours back home. And he listened as I offloaded the wheat and the chaff. And he was there in that moment that I needed him, in my 2 a.m. moment. I know I nearly forgot. You happen to know this person. His name is DJ Cons. A friend is someone we can talk to. And a friend is someone we can depend on at our 2 a.m. moments when we are most vulnerable. And sometimes we're even asking them to come down at 2 p.m. Who can you call at 2 a.m.? Who can you depend on when you're in your darkest moment, your moment where you need to talk through something deep? Who are you present for? And who will you take the call from at 2 a.m.? A friend is someone I can talk to, and a friend is someone I can depend on. It's also someone I can grow with. And this continues also as we explore the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Aristotle famously said that friendship is a school for virtue. Now, C.S. Lewis famously said it's also a school for vice. And you parents who have got teenagers know all about that. But that's another sermon altogether. At our best, our friendships are basically about helping each other to grow and be better people, to take on characteristics, to take on the very image of God and take on his love and his care and his kindness and his goodness and self-control and all the other fruit of the Spirit. That's the best that friendship offers us to become people of virtue. And you know what? It's often in times of great disappointment that times of great growth happens. Maybe even great disappointment from the people we thought were our friends. Jesus is about a day's walk away from Bethany at this present moment. And yet we read, even though there's no train, even though there's no bus, even though there's no Uber to take him there quickly, we read this. When he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. I don't know about you, but that would be a little bit of a friendship fail there. Not only does Jesus miss being with Lazarus in the hospital as he's really going through his trial, he even misses the funeral. By the time he does get down there, Lazarus has already been placed in the tomb, and Mary and Martha cannot hide their disappointment. When Jesus arrives, Mary doesn't even go out to see him. And when she finally does go out to see him, what does she say? She just says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." If you had been here, if you'd been here. I thought you were the person I could depend on. If you'd been here. And Martha ends up saying the same thing, almost exactly the same words. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." You ever felt let down by a friend? Sometimes our friends are going to let us down. Sometimes it's simply because they're human. Sometimes it's because they've forgotten about us. Sometimes it really will be due to neglect in some kind of way. But other times they're going to let us down because they have competing priorities, asking for their attention in their lives at that very moment. And that's exactly what's happening here to Jesus. What do you do when you're being by the side of your friend when they're really in a moment of need means that you can't be by the side of your wife or your husband? What do you do when helping your friend is going to take you away from your children? How do you respond to those kind of crises of priorities? They are very difficult. Who are you going to serve? Well, that's what happened with Jesus right now. He is wanting to be there by the side of his friend whom he loves, but he's also called to do the will of God too. And for a period of time, that will lead to disappointment until it leads to growth. Until it leads to growth of the most amazing kind. Martha has grown since episode 1, back with that first dinner party that she was holding for Jesus. She's grown. Remember back then, Martha was the agitated one. Mary was the one sitting by Jesus' feet, lapping up everything that he said. Now we find it's a little bit different. Martha says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask." Now that's pretty good growth. This is trust. She has grown, and it leads to a wonderful conversation, one of the ones that we often quote. Jesus says, your brother is going to rise again. And she says, well, yeah, I know he's going to rise again at the resurrection at the last day, which is still pretty good theology if you ask me. But then he says, no, I've got something else in store for you, Martha. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? See what's happening here. In her moment of grief, what Jesus is doing is bringing some hope to his friend Martha, a hope that only he can give, and then is revealing something profound about himself, that he is not just the one who can point to resurrection at the last day. No, he is the resurrection. He is the source of resurrection, and it's about to break forth right there in their very lives. Right in that moment, he is helping her to have a bigger perspective, to grow in trust and faith. And by the question, do you believe this? He's calling her to grow into something bigger than what she is. A friend is someone I can grow with. A friend is someone who, by their acceptance and their conversations and their encouragement and indeed their questions, do you believe this, are helping us to have a bigger perspective and grow to be bigger people, the people that God calls us to be. And this is exactly what happens. And Martha says, yeah, really, I do believe it. I can actually see it. I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God. You talk to all the New Testament scholars, they say whenever that is mentioned, it's the turning point in the story. And as for wholeness, which is the ultimate end result of growth, well, that storyline goes to Lazarus, don't you think? That story goes to Lazarus because Mary and Martha and Jesus go to the cemetery, they go to the tomb, and what do we read next? We find that Jesus weeps. And why is he weeping when he's about to raise him from the dead? He weeps because he's entering his friend's grief. He weeps for his own grief. He loves this person, and that's exactly when the crowd say, see how much he loved him. He enters into that grief. A good friend will enter and mourn when we mourn, and shed a tear when we shed a tear. And then he prays, and then he calls Lazarus to come out, and then a man who has been dead for 4 days stumbles out with his grave clothes dangling from his wrists, alive and restored and whole. A friend helps us to grow. They are the people who, through their presence, help us to pursue our God-given callings and take on the very image of God, the very image of Christ in our life. Who is helping you by their prayerful, loving presence to grow into somebody bigger? Who's asking you some tough questions? Who's calling you out when you need to be called out? And who are you providing that kind of care and presence to yourself? A friend is someone I can talk to, depend on, and grow with. And they're also somebody I can enjoy. They're not just people that we can shed a tear with, they're people that we can share laughs with. They're not just people that we are giving support to, but we're giving gifts to. We party with them. We play. And the last episode of the Mary, Martha, and Lazarus story actually brings this out. When they go back to Bethany, that little flat just outside of Jerusalem, here a dinner is given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with them. Now, I don't think that this was a kind of, appetizer kind of night with a little bit of soft jazz playing on the Bluetooth speaker. I actually think this was a party. I think this was a dinner party. I think there was music and there was singing and there was dancing and there was stories and there was laughter and they were celebrating Jesus, who he is, what he's done. And they were certainly celebrating the fact that Lazarus was sitting there with them. Somebody that we enjoy. And very soon Martha's going to give some gifts too. She's going to take a very precious bottle of perfume, maybe even a family heirloom because of the huge price that we know is attached to it. She's going to break it. She's going to pour it onto Jesus. It's going to have all sorts of symbolic value. But she's going to give gifts there, which are all a part of enjoying a friendship. A friend is someone that I can enjoy. Whether it's because we enjoy having those dinner parties together, or because you make me laugh, or you stimulate my thinking, or because you share my sense of interest in moody European films with subtitles where everybody dies in the end, but they die so meaningfully. Maybe because you think that New Order is a fantastic band, or maybe because you love the music of Florence and the Machine just like me, or maybe it's because when we get together, I somehow feel lighter as a result of us being in each other's presence. A friend is someone I can enjoy, who brings joy into your life. And how are you bringing joy into theirs? A friend is someone I can talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. And how do we put that into practice? Let me give you 3 quick points as we wrap this up. I would invite you to see friendship as a sacred calling. Just a few days after that dinner party, Jesus will talk to his friends in John chapter 15 and say, I don't call you servants anymore. I call you friends. Because a friend basically shares everything with their friends, doesn't hold it back, not like a master and a servant. And then he says, I want you to love others the way I have loved you. So basically, friendship is a holy calling, and he wants that friendship to be shared, that kind of love to be shared, to be given to other people. Friendship is a sacred calling. Treat it as such. Secondly, prioritize it in your diary. Yes, we're all busy. Absolutely. Right now, I'm in the middle of moving from house to house to house because our house renovation is going over time. I'm just packing up and unpacking and packing up and unpacking, trying to do work and then have wonderful moments with your church, and I'm feeling that as well. But hang on. The latest research says that the average Australian spends 6 hours watching TV and streaming video and on social media alone per day. So I would suggest this to you. If you have the time for Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and Twitter, if you have the time for Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime and Stan, if you have the time for YouTube Shorts, Instagram Stories, Reels and LinkedIn videos, if you can watch the whole season of The Voice, if you can binge watch Squid Games, if you can watch reruns of Big Bang Theory, if you can watch reruns of Friends, then you have time for friends. Prioritize it in your diary and then be the initiator. There's this kind of myth that goes around that friendship just happens. It just happens organically. No, it doesn't. After those wonderful golden years of high school and university, when we're all in the same place, basically doing the same kind of program, no, you actually have to get it done. You have to get it down in the diary, prioritize it, and you have to be the initiator. Go and take the step to be in contact with that person. 3 ways on how to do that, what you do in Friendship Lab. Number 1, check-ins. This is something that you can do very, very easily. You can do it even right now, but you never would do that in the middle of a sermon, would you? You could do it right now by basically, it might be a text, it might be Zoom, it could be anything. It could be something in which you just send a WhatsApp message or a text or an email or a card, an old-fashioned card. You got the personalized handwriting there as well, and that's something simply saying, hey mate, been thinking of you, how are you doing? How did the job interview go? How are you feeling now? Are you feeling better? What's going on in your life? That's a check-in. Then there's the catch-up. A catch-up can be done with an actual phone, it can be done on Zoom, it can be done via video or audio. Hey mate, I'm calling for no other reason than to find out how you're doing today. And then there's the meetup. And the meetup is when you actually get together. So, yes, you've got your 6 hours that you want to spend watching all of those programs on TV and streaming video and all your social media. How long is a check-in going to take you? 10 seconds? How long is a catch-up going to take you? 10 minutes? Okay, the meetup is going to take maybe an hour or so. But that's if you even get there in the first place. Can I suggest what we all say from now on? We don't do anything more like this. Hey, yeah, we should get together sometime. You and I both know that that leads nowhere. So instead of doing a, hey, yeah, we should get together sometime, how about something that is specific and sets a potential time and place and invites negotiation? Try something like this. Hey mate, found this amazing pizza place that does 2 for 1 on Mondays. Would love to share one with you and catch up. Are you free this Monday at say 7 p.m? I'm flexible, so pick another time if that doesn't work. See, it's specific, it's starting a negotiation, and the people who are interested will say, I can't do Monday, but I can do Tuesday. I'm not really interested in pizza, but I really do like Thai. And before you know it, you've got a date in the diary. A friend is someone I can talk to, depend on, grow with, and enjoy. And this has been a wonderful contribution, this wonderful series, Reconnecting, and I'm just really glad that I've had a part in it. Bless you.
Well, in the spirit of friendship, I have a small confession to make. I'm actually a bit embarrassed about the IKEA incident. When I said that I needed to go to IKEA, it wasn't a grand gesture of friendship. I just needed to go to IKEA. I did go to IKEA, but I did sit down with Sheridan because those moments are so profound in a friendship. Shared suffering or compassion, to suffer with. Compassion literally means to suffer with. are some of the most sacred moments in human life, aren't they? Sharing those moments. So it was an honour to share with Sheridan his 2 a.m. moment. But just as we wrap up now, a couple of things. If you'd like to hear more from Sheridan, his website, let me see if I can get this going. Do the old battery twirl trick, see if that works. There it is. You can go to friendshiplab.org, which he mentioned earlier, or also to his personal website, sheridanvoysey.com. And at this particular URL, right up the top there, there's another talk that he gives on friendship, and he goes in a little bit more into the different sort of types of friends and the process of forming friendships. So if this has tweaked your interest in what he has to share, then you can find more there, or you can check out his books as well. And our thanks to him for recording this for us today at New Vine. All right, I just want to wrap up for a moment while the band comes up, to pull out a couple of key takeaways and maybe put a sharper point on some of these things. They were great takeaways at the end there, weren't they? But just let's sort of personalise this a little bit more. So the sermon has finished now, so it's okay to do your check-in. In fact, we're going to take just a moment while the band plays. We're going to take a moment. And this is a moment where you can get your phone out if you want to. Take a moment to think about someone that is either on your heart or your mind, or that you haven't caught up with in a while, and write them a 10-second text. Hey, thinking of you, how you doing? Just checking that you're all right. So go ahead and do that right now. Let's not leave it any longer. Let's not think, we'll get to that sometime. Let's do it now. In fact, I'm going to do it too. That was a bit longer than 10 seconds, wasn't it? That's a minute well spent. Thank you. Maybe that's something you can even diarise. Put in your calendar somewhere in the week. I'm going to take 10 minutes. I'm going to text 3-5 people. Just check in. All right, second thing. Pick up on what Sheridan said. Who will you catch up with this week? Who will you catch up with this week? That 10, 20-minute phone call just to say, hi, I was just thinking about you. Wondering how you're going. Maybe you can put that in your calendar for later this afternoon or tomorrow or something like that. Set an alert, something like that. Who can you check in with? Because friendship isn't just about having friends. It's about being friends, isn't it? And often being is what leads to the having. And before you leave today, one more final challenge for us, picking up again on what Sheridan shared. Before you leave today, who can you arrange a meet-up with? Someone else here in our midst that you can connect with afterwards and say, hey, I've been meaning to get to know you a bit more, or hang out some more, spend some more time with you. Would you like to get together for coffee, or invite them over for a meal, wherever it might be? So, who are you going to check in with? Who will you catch up with this week? And before you go today, is there someone that you can arrange a meet-up with? And maybe they seem like small steps, don't they? But friendships are built on the back of small steps. So, by the way, I'm free for coffee, especially if you're buying this week. All right. Well, thanks again to Sheridan. Quickly, before we finish with a song, coming up, Libby mentioned before, our own Sheridan Pethybridge, will be sharing with us next week, then AJ, and then in a couple of weeks' time, we've got Darren Chapman, author of The Happy Marriage. Now, I know not all of us here are married. That might not be in your future even. But I'm sure that what Darren shares will still have transferable learnings to other friendships and other relationships. So I'd encourage you to come along and hear Darren. And if you are married or planning to be married or something, I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it as well. In a few weeks' time, we also have Vanessa Viotti, National Director of Compassion Brazil, with us, part of our partnership with Brazil. So look forward to that. And then in November, my former colleague from Alpha Crucis, Lily Arasaratham-Smith, will be here talking about bridging the divides, connecting across all these sort of divides and polarizations that we experience in our modern life today. So lots to look forward to, but for now, why don't we stand and sing one more time. If you're comfortable doing so, would you join us? And let's sing one more time, focus our thoughts as we finish on our Lord.